All right, this is Drawing and Talking with Nathaniel Sullivan. What's going on? It's pretty quick. This is basically like making a recording, doing drawing and talking while I'm waiting for a guy to show up to repair the garage door. So we'll see. We'll see if he shows again another hour. It's one of those things where you're stuck waiting for. And I got a 2 hour period. I got to be here between. I have to be here between 12 and 2, so we'll see how that works out. And it's a drag, but it's not a major drag. So such is life, right? Yeah. So I was going to talk about something. I was going to talk about the midterm elections in the United States that took place yesterday. And I was kind of going to talk about them because I'm frankly just not that interested. And I know it's kind of odd to choose a topic in which you're not that interested. And in some ways, it's kind of a bad choice. But on the other hand, it's kind of interesting why I'm not that interested. I don't know. I'm pretty interested in politics in some ways, although I've gotten over a lot of that. I'm a lot less interested than I used to be. And I'm definitely more interested in boring, sort of objective things. If you want to have a discussion, if you love the Democrats, if you love the Republicans, I'm really not your guy. I'm honestly very removed from that. I genuinely mean that. I mean that's not bogus. When people talk about how liberals react and talk about how people talk about conservatives react, I don't seem to have those reactions. I really don't seem to fall easily in either one of these camps, and a lot of times I'm just not that interested. I guess two kind of ways of making this point. I once heard someone say, some conservative commentator said something like, people still haven't forgiven, liberals still haven't forgiven Dick Cheney for trouncing John Edwards in a debate. And I have no idea if Dick Cheney did actually trounce John Edwards in a debate. I was just kind of amazed. I thought, wow, I thought to myself, did John Edwards run for president? For vice president. I'd totally forgotten that. I'd totally forgotten. Not only was I not mad at Dick Cheney about this debate, I couldn't even really remember this debate. And so if that's a characteristic of liberals, then that's just not me. There are lots of things like that. Another indication that in a lot of ways I'm not that interested is that last night when the election results were coming in, I went to sleep. I didn't really pay attention. I kind of took a glance at them at 8 o'clock, and then I went off and played Portals 2 with my son. And so I suspect in fact I know I'm pretty typical of the American public that way, which the American public for the most part did not care a lot about this midterm election that just took place. I mean, the turnout was not. The numbers. Seriously, I mean, I knew, going in, I knew with this midterm race coming up, and I knew it was going to be decided by very small number of people in a very small number of states, because just there weren't that many competitive races. It's just not really that interesting election, a lot of ways. And one of the things I would say is that, some of this is personal, right? Some of this is just kind of getting fed up with politics and not really being that interested in politics. It deserves the same criticism as basketball. The criticism of basketball is like, why don't you just watch the last 5 minutes? Because in a basketball game, often it seems like it's just tied all the way through, and in the last 5 minutes are really what's decisive, really what decides it. Why would you bother watching? It's boring at the rest of the time, right? It's just tied all the way through, and then in the end, finally, someone. It's just the clock. The clock stops, and whoever's ahead at that time seems to win. Politics really has that kind of air. I mean, it's sound and fury. It's a lot of sound and fury. It's a lot of talking. It's a lot of nonsense. What people say doesn't really matter, and what really matters is what they do. And boy, this midterm election definitely is a case of that, because the moment after the election, right, the sounds that that everyone is making. So the Republicans did really well. I mean, they had a great night, and the moment it's over, a lot of them sounding much more conciliatory. Yeah, I mean, they ran opposing Obama, or vowing to oppose Obama, which makes perfect sense. I mean, it was totally the strategy. It was totally the right call, totally the right strategy for this kind of election. And the moment after it's over, start sounding very conciliatory because, after all, they're going to have to pass some things. Why that campaigning? It's just, that's over now, right? All that's gone. If you paid attention to that, I get the feel I feel like you have to feel like it was a total waste of time, right? It was a giant waste of time, right? They didn't really mean any of that. So that's one reason not to pay a lot of attention to politics, or at least not to pay attention to a lot of what politicians say, certainly during campaigns. But another thing, and this is perhaps somewhat deeper, somewhat more interesting, another reason not to pay that much attention to politics, and certainly not to the analysis, is that elections are pretty rare things, and elections just do not happen that often. Midterm elections every 2 years, right? Every 2 years into a president's term. These are just not real common occurrences, and as a result, I mean, you don't know a lot, right? You don't really know. You can't really. If something happens over and over again, if something happens regularly, if something is regularly going on, there are a lot of opportunities to study it. There are a lot of opportunities to analyze it, to really figure out what's going on. You have a lot of examples to look at. You often have examples to look at. Politics is it's really disastrous that way. I mean, these are relatively rare occurrences. So you can try and compile data about what will happen during a presidential year, what will happen with turnout, what kind of issues will motivate people, what kind of people will go to the polls, right, so forth and so on. Yeah, and you can come up with pretty decent pictures. But you really have to keep in mind with all this analysis. I mean, elections are pretty rare events, and it's really hard to have reliable information about them. So not only do you want to take any analysis that you listen to with a grain of salt, including mine, and I'm not really going to offer any, you want to take all that stuff with a huge grain of salt. You may not want to listen at all, right? It may not really be worth listening in the first place. I mean, even if people aren't being partisan, even if people are trying to be objective, it's just really the case that you just don't have a lot of data. You just don't have a lot of info on these races, and you shouldn't be expected to. They're rare events. We don't know a lot about what's going on. It's hard to get information. But on the other hand, this is what makes elections so interesting to people in politics. I mean, you actually get some data. You actually people actually do go to the polls and make a decision. People actually do go to the polls and make a choice. I will say, for me, just personally, the races really, the races for senators, for House members, they really weren't that interesting. The governor's races weren't really that interesting. I was interested, I think, in 4 states: Arkansas, Alaska. I can't remember the other 2. Measures passed for a higher minimum wage. I was really struck by that. And in several states, marijuana did really well. I found that kind of striking. So that was kind of a fascinating, or at least an interesting part of this recent election. So there you are for what it's worth. All right, thanks. Still waiting on Garage Repairman. So sign off. Thanks. Like and subscribe. Thanks for listening.